So how can governments apply this idea of network communities and the idea that information is like ammunition or capital? First of all, I think governments can think of their constituencies as divided into four groups: the citizens they're trying to reach, the businesses who run the communication services, the discontented who are likely to oppose the government, and fourth, other nations. With citizens, I think governments should be aware that as technology improves, citizens' expectations of how public services should be delivered will rise. The tsunami help example illustrates this. As the technology of blogging and wikis became more popular, the failure of governments to use those during disasters became inexcusable. Second, governments can try to shape national identity, but ultimately people interpret what it means to be a citizen. So, for example, in Canada, the government used radio stations and the telecom and telegraph networks to build up the idea of the Canadian nation and its transcontinental nature. However, in Taiwan, the use of the cable television network actually built up the strength of the opposition and an alternate identity compared to the one supported by the government in power. In terms of the business constituency, it's important for governments to remember that while it can promote the development of the communications infrastructure and its services, just as the Chinese government did in the late 20th century with its phone network. However, on the whole, businesses are best at popularizing communications infrastructure and services, and efforts that are solely government-driven often fail. The example of the Brazilian telegraph network in the 19th century that was built for military reasons in the Amazon, but was not sustainable because it didn't attract enough commercial activity, is an example of this situation. With the discontent, governments should be aware that activists are often early adopters of technology. This is intuitively obvious, and we see it time and time again. Also, governments should be aware that suppressing information and idea is possible, but requires continuous effort. With regard to other nations, governments can think about who is in your network community. Is it governments, businesses, citizens, the political opposition, other countries, international organizations? And how do these members of the network community interpret your information and ideas? We have the several examples of the public broadcasters: the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, Al Jazeera of Qatar, and Doordarshan of India. Each of these had to cater to its audience to win their attention, but even then, the audience will have its own attention. These are the several lessons for governments from the idea of network communities and information as capital and ammunition.